The severe weather marathon continues, and last night's severe weather brought us more tornadoes than we were expecting, and the next few days this week could be similar. So I'm going to break down everything that you need to know, and we're going to be live every single day this week to cover all the severe weather. So without wasting any time, it's going to be a longer one. Let's get right into the forecast. Jumping right into our day one categorical outlook, you're going to notice that we have 4 different areas with a slight risk. The first one's going to be back down in the southwest into the Phoenix area in southern Arizona, where we've had repeated rounds of monsoon severe weather over and over and over again. We do have Mark Sudduth and Scott Caseman down there chasing those. They have been live on stream the last few days. You also have another isolated risk out near the Nebraska, Colorado, and Kansas tri-state region towards the Nebraska Panhandle. That's another area of concern. Then we have 2 larger areas of concern where we have slight risks in place. One of those is going to stretch from Iowa through Minnesota, back through South Dakota, even clipping parts of southern North Dakota. And the other one, which is probably the most significant area of concern, especially for any type of a tornado threat, that one is going to be all the way from central Illinois, pushing eastward through the Ohio Valley and all the way to the Atlantic coast, through Jersey and DC, Maryland, Delaware, even clipping parts of New York. So there's a lot of different areas that are going to be in some region of concern with a slight 2 out of 5 risk today. We're going to go through all those probabilistic outlooks in a second here, but just note that there are a lot of different areas around the country that are experiencing some sort of severe weather this afternoon and evening. On our tornado probabilistic outlook, we are going to have 2 different areas with a 2% risk region. And I will say that a 5% is definitely going to be possible back into Ohio and Indiana at the 11:30 a.m. outlook update. So make sure that you're staying tuned to our Twitter, as we'll be posting that if it happens, if there is an upgrade. But that'll happen kind of close to the time that this video comes out. So make sure that you're staying tuned for that in case it does happen. But what we do have is this 2% out here from DC through Baltimore, even back through Philly and parts of New Jersey. And then our main larger 2% region all the way from central Illinois through Indiana, through Ohio, and even into western Pennsylvania, including Pittsburgh. So it's also going to include even parts of southernmost Michigan here. So there's a lot of different areas included in this 2%, even that sliver of West Virginia that extends up between Ohio and Pennsylvania. So a lot going on, a lot of areas included in a lower end probabilistic outlook for tornadoes today. Our wind outlook is where things get a little bit spicier, though, as all 4 of those slight risk regions are going to be included, including down in the desert southwest towards Phoenix, where you've got that 15% region in yellow with a 5% region in brown there. We have another one of those near the tri-state region of Nebraska, Kansas, and Colorado. Another one in our larger slight risk from Iowa, Minnesota, and South Dakota, even into North Dakota. And that one's going to include our only SIG 1 risk of the moment anyway, where we do have that risk for maybe 70 to maybe 80 mile per hour wind gusts and isolated instances in there. So that's definitely something you got to pay attention to if you're in that region. And then our main area of concern is going to be back from the Midwest through the Ohio Valley and then out towards the Mid-Atlantic, where we have a large 15% in yellow there. And you're also going to see that red 30% risk as things become a little bit more linear, a little bit more congested of a storm mode. Everything's going to bundle up and bring a lot of wind as it rolls on through western Pennsylvania and eastern Ohio. So definitely something to pay close attention to throughout the evening here tonight as our storm mode shifts from a little bit more of a discrete mode into more of a robust ball of storms blowing on through, bringing those strong, damaging winds. Hail is not going to be quite as much of a concern today, but there is this isolated region here where we could see some golf ball to maybe tennis ball size hail in isolated instances back in South Dakota and maybe even southern North Dakota. That's where you're seeing that hatched SIG 1 region and then that 15% yellow region. And you'll notice really all throughout here, there is that 5% risk all the way from really close to Denver back through the northern plains, through Iowa, through Illinois, back through the Ohio Valley, and then all the way off towards the Atlantic coast, where we could see isolated instances of damaging hail. But again, hail is not a significant threat for today. It would be associated with any particularly strong updrafts that are able to grow some hailstones, but I'm not expecting anything super robust in terms of a hail producing event today. But definitely the chance for that golf ball to maybe tennis ball size hail in an isolated instance or two back in that circle on the left-hand side where you have that yellow and that hatched region. Looking into Tuesday's outlook, we're going to have a similar region outlined all the way from the northern plains back through the mid-Atlantic. It's the same type of setup that we're going to see for multiple days in a row here, including what we saw last night, which overperformed and gave us a lot more tornadoes than we were expecting, especially in Illinois. We have that 2 out of 5 slight risk that is going to extend from Illinois all the way back down through the Virginias, even parts of Kentucky, including large portions of Ohio and Indiana as well. So definitely a lot of risk setting up for Tuesday. We are going to have a 2% tornado risk region region all the way from Chicago and back towards central northern Illinois, all the way back down through Indianapolis, Cincinnati, even Dayton, Ohio, towards Lexington, Kentucky, even into West Virginia as well. This is also going to include Columbus, Ohio. So a large region, and this might expand just a little bit, where we could see a slightly larger region in that 2% as we go forward into Tuesday. It's possible that we see an upgrade to a 5% tornado risk in there at some point as well, especially as details get a little bit more resolved. But there's a lot more uncertainty as we roll forward into Tuesday, Wednesday, and even Thursday, because everything is kind of dependent on how the atmosphere recovers from the previous day's severe weather, because a lot of this severe weather is occupying the same space, driven by the same synoptic setup. Our wind outlook is going to include a very, very large 5% risk region all the way from the northern plains back through the Midwest, through the Ohio Valley, and even into the mid-Atlantic. You're going to see that SIG 1 risk already outlined for tomorrow, because I think tomorrow is going to be a little bit more of a wind-driven event. I think the low-level dynamics are going to be a little bit more favorable for that. So we are looking at that SIG 1 hatched region there, all the way from Chicago and north central Illinois, all the way back down through West Virginia, through Ohio and Indiana, even parts of northern Kentucky as well. So a very large region where we could certainly be looking at the risk for damaging winds, including winds on the order of maybe 70 to 80 miles per hour in isolated instances. You're going to notice it's only a 15% risk region right now. I would expect that a 30% is probably going to be in the cards for tomorrow, so you may see that red 30% region show up tomorrow. Same deal as Monday. Tuesday's threat is not going to include that much of a hail threat, but there is a very large region where a 5% hail outlook has been issued, where we could see isolated instances of damaging hail. Again, I'm not expecting anything crazy, and for tomorrow, I highly doubt that we see anything on the order of golf ball, tennis ball size hail like we might see in a few isolated instances this evening, but still the risk for some damaging hail out there in the Midwest and northern plains, including the Dakotas, Nebraska, Iowa, and Minnesota. All right, day 3 outlook. This is for Wednesday. You're going to notice similar areas being occupied, this time from the central plains all the way back down through the Missouri Valley, parts of the Ohio Valley, and then down into the Carolinas even a little bit this time. But some similar areas still being occupied, like Illinois, Indiana, Ohio, West Virginia, other areas that have already been impacted by severe weather Sunday through Tuesday this week. Again, I'm kind of talking in retrospect here as if we were on Wednesday. We already have that 2 out of 5 slight risk that has been put in place in western Nebraska, areas like Sidney, maybe even North Platte. We're also going to be seeing Rapid City, South Dakota included in this one as well. So a lot of different areas that will be included in that risk for severe weather, and slightly more robust severe weather in the western portion of this risk zone. But I think Wednesday likely won't be quite as significant as Monday and Tuesday, but to be determined again, because a lot of what's going to happen on Wednesday, like I mentioned before, is going to depend on what happens throughout the day here on Monday and Tuesday. All right, for the sake of time, we're going to go through the timing of our severe weather somewhat quickly here. You're going to notice morning storms still going on back towards Pittsburgh by 11 a.m. More explosive development expected by around 3 to 5 p.m. here in eastern Ohio and parts of western Pennsylvania, maybe even parts of West Virginia as well. Those are going to pose the risk for a couple of tornadoes with any of those initial cells that start to get going. Keep in mind, this is 5 p.m. Central Time here, so 6 p.m. local time out there on the coast. And then we're going to see those stronger storms near Nebraska starting to develop as well into the later evening hours by around 8 p.m. Mountain Time. And then we're also going to be seeing those storms down near Phoenix that will eventually begin to develop as well as we roll into the evening hours. Any of those are going to pose that continued risk. But you're going to notice even into the overnight hours here, this is by 3 a.m. Eastern Time or 2 a.m. Central Time, we are still looking at a lot of stronger storms out here throughout Michigan, Indiana, Ohio, West Virginia, even maybe into Pennsylvania a little bit, and then new storm development starting to fire off like crazy out there in South Dakota into the overnight hours. So there is quite a lot going on, and that is going to continue with these storms continuing to push off to the east and southeast respectively as we go through the overnight hours and into Tuesday morning. And then by Tuesday afternoon, in the early afternoon, we're looking at a larger, stronger section of storms starting to roll through areas like Davenport and especially Chicago. So the early afternoon on Tuesday for Chicago, definitely looking a little bit spicier. Still stronger storms out here in the Virginias, maybe eastern Kentucky as well, especially in West Virginia. And then as we go forward into Tuesday afternoon, we're getting much more of a robust severe weather setup in terms of a significant wind risk potentially developing on Tuesday. By 5 p.m. here, we're looking at a pretty classic Boeing segment and a bowling ball of storms. A lot of discrete supercells possibly firing off back into North Dakota, maybe even parts of South Dakota as well. So that's going to be a secondary area to watch for potentially a tornado threat as we go into Tuesday evening in North Dakota and then parts of the northern plains. And then as we go forward in time through Tuesday evening, those storms are going to continue in a giant ball of mostly wind damage, but embedded tornadoes definitely going to be a possibility as we roll through Tuesday night. And then as we push into the overnight hours on Tuesday into the AM hours of Wednesday, you're going to notice more storms beginning to fire off back towards Iowa and still residual thunderstorms throughout the Virginias into Kentucky and the Ohio Valley, even back towards Indianapolis by 7 a.m. Maybe some residual showers and storms off towards Jersey and Delaware as well. You might remember the ring of fire that we talked about on Friday in our last forecast video with that high pressure system here in the upper levels of the atmosphere centered around the four corner states that's driving that nice ridge and that good upper level flow throughout parts of the Ohio Valley, even as that flow comes down from the northwest. So a lot of that northwesterly flow driving our severe weather, and that trend will continue. Notice our entire forecast period here, that high pressure system shifts just a little bit off towards the east or northeast, but you're going to see a lot of that upper level support still in place as we go through Tuesday night and even into Wednesday morning. You're going to see a lot of decent flow aloft for these storms to work with. That's the driving factor with our severe weather as we have that ridge going on with that high pressure. You're also going to notice a lot of areas where our 500 millibar winds look particularly all right, including out towards like western Pennsylvania, eastern Ohio for this evening on Monday, maybe even back towards the Twin Cities or Fargo Monday evening as well. That's going to promote that divergence, that lift essentially. And then you're going to notice those 500 millibar winds start to pick up again as we go into Tuesday. So a lot of different areas, you're going to notice just these localized areas where those 500 millibar winds are a lot faster. That's going to promote stronger storm development in those regions. A lot more divergence aloft is essentially what that insinuates. Even into the overnight hours, you're going to notice still some decent 500 millibar flow by 1 a.m. Central Time on Wednesday. So 2 a.m. local time for the East Coast there. And that's even going to continue a little bit into that overnight hours towards 7 a.m. on Wednesday. Still a little bit of that flow available. Our low-level vorticity is going to be very prevalent for a lot of these storms as well, especially on Tuesday. You're going to see these big swaths of vorticity making their way throughout basically Chicago and then down through the Virginias as we go through Tuesday. But you're also going to notice that Tuesday evening, a lot of vorticity present into the northern plains for the Dakotas. I think we could be looking at a little bit more of a discrete supercell mode there, where we could see a little bit more of a robust threat for tornadoes back into the northern plains on Tuesday evening. So that's definitely going to be one to watch for, because the tornado threat in our main area of concern back towards the Ohio Valley is not going to be quite as significant. But there's still a lot of vorticity available to these storms, even as we continue through the overnight hours Tuesday into Wednesday in the AM. All right, I'm going to very quickly go through a lot of our parameters here. We're looking at our mixed layer CAPE. You're going to notice there is plenty of it at numerous different times throughout this forecast period. But one of the main limiting factors for the northern plains for Tuesday night is going to be that we don't have a ton of mixed layer CAPE. So we may have a lot of storms that aren't able to actually break through the cap. So if we don't get storm initiation, we won't be looking at any storms taking advantage of the environment up there. But if we do see storm initiation, we could definitely see a little bit more of a favorable tornado environment. But you're going to notice just a lot of CAPE in the forecast period in tons of the areas that are going to be dealing with these storms back into the Ohio Valley over this entire period. Here's a look at our 0 to 3 kilometer storm relative helicity. This is just how much spin is going to be available to those storms. You're going to notice there's actually a decent amount. So there is going to be that risk for embedded tornadoes this evening as we go into about 7 p.m. Eastern time out there in the Virginias and even into Eastern Ohio, Western Pennsylvania as well. There's going to be a lot of that spin available to these storms. As we go forward, though, into Tuesday, you're going to notice, once again, that similar theme is going to develop. A lot of these storms that fire off into the early morning hours and early afternoon hours on Tuesday going to have some spin available to them. And then as we roll into Tuesday evening, lots of spin will be available to any supercells that are able to fire off in the northern plains. So that's why I'm especially worried about that region if we do get storms that actually fire off. And that trend will continue even into basically the overnight hours. You're going to see this is at 11 p.m. Mountain Time here, essentially, or midnight Central Time for technically Wednesday in the Northern Plains. Still tons of helicity available to these storms as a low-level jet gets introduced. Still plenty of storm relative helicity at 0 to 3 kilometers available out where we're going to have more residual storms as we roll through Tuesday night as well towards the Ohio Valley, the Virginias, and into Indiana. And finally here, I'm going to quickly go through the shear. You're going to notice it is a very favorably sheared environment as we roll forward in our forecast period, especially when we go into Tuesday afternoon and evening back towards the Ohio Valley. We're going to be looking at a very highly sheared environment. Even Tuesday evening, very good shearing in the northern plains as well. A lot of the parameters in the northern plains exist. The question is, will we actually get storms to fire off? And there is definitely somewhat low confidence in that. That's why there isn't a significant threat expected in the northern plains, but still something we have to pay attention to. And then still a lot of shear in the Virginias and into Kentucky as we go forward into late on Tuesday evening. So a decently favorable environment driven by that upper level support that we do have. All right, finally for our service features, I'm just going to show you our dew points because things are going to be pretty muggy. The Corn Belt still doing what it does, just producing tons of moisture. That moisture able to seep even into the northern plains by Tuesday evening. You're going to see, again, that's part of the reason I'm concerned. There's going to be decently low LCLs, essentially more surface-based storms that the cloud deck is a little bit lower on. It's a little easier to get tornadoes to the ground in that environment, but plenty of moisture to create a lot of instability for the storms that exist out into our main areas of concern through the Ohio Valley, even parts of the Midwest and back towards the mid-Atlantic as we go forward in time. This is already by Tuesday evening, but still into the overnight on Tuesday, lots of moisture. And if we look back again towards Monday afternoon and evening, that's tonight, we are looking at a lot of moisture forecasts in that main area of concern. So still a lot of favorable features for a multiple round severe weather event over the next few days. And again, this is on the tail end of what we already had on Sunday. So lots of severe weather coming back to back to back days. We're going to be live for every single one of them. And that's going to take us to the end of today's forecast video. Like I said, though, we are going to be going live every single day for the severe weather. We were live last night. We're going to be live tonight on Monday. We're going to be live Tuesday, Wednesday, and probably even Thursday as we go forward into later this week. A lot of severe weather coming, so make sure that you're subscribed and have notifications turned on so that you know when we are live. We're going to have a bunch of storm chasers out in the field as well for our coverage. Lots of things going on. So we'll see you within that coverage. Stay safe out there, and we'll see you soon.